Well, hey, you guys. Here I am once again for my Flickers of Fear. I know, again, I haven't done one of these for quite a while. I've just been busy doing other stuff and haven't really had time to, watch any movies or read any books and review them and stuff like that. But I'm doing it now, so don't complain too much. Okay, so this movie here, I feel like the story behind this movie, which is the 2020 supernatural horror film, The Empty Man, is a pretty odd, kind of convoluted story. I actually didn't know a lot of this until I started researching this video. So this movie was actually based on a graphic novel, another thing I didn't know. And the graphic novel is also called The Empty Man, and it's by Cullen Bunn and Vanessa R. Del Rey. And this movie was also the directorial debut of a guy named David Pryor. He doesn't have a huge resume yet, but he would later go on to direct one of the better episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, that show that was on Netflix. He did the one called The Autopsy, which I think was actually one of my favorite ones. So The Empty Man cost about $16 million to make, more or less, and it was released by 20th Century Fox, but with pretty much zero fanfare. Like, they had almost no marketing for it or anything. And it was received very poorly by both audiences and critics. It pretty much got eviscerated, like, in the reviews at the time, and it only made about a quarter of its budget back, a little bit more than a quarter of its budget. So from that, you would think, well, this poor little movie is poised to just vanish into embarrassing obscurity, right? But then a kind of weird thing happened. So once the movie dropped on streaming, it very quickly started to develop a cult following. And after that, it subsequently got kind of a critical reappraisal. So I feel like through word of mouth, like, the reputation of the movie slowly improved, so much so that it even started appearing on kind of like best of lists, like best horror movies of that year or whatever, whereas before everyone just like thought it sucked for some reason. I don't really know why there was this big, huge about face. It's possible, I've heard this kind of brought up. The way that it was marketed, I mean, it did have a little bit of marketing, just not very, very much, but the way that it was marketed, it seemed like they were trying to sell it as kind of a creepypasta style movie, like the similarly titled movies The Slender Man and The Bye Bye Man, which was terrible, by the way. Slender Man was also kind of terrible. I really didn't like The Bye Bye Man, though. And so I feel like they were expecting that, and then when they saw The Empty Man, which has this kind of much more inscrutable cosmic-horror-tinged narrative, I want to say, that they were just kind of like, what the fuck is this? I was expecting one thing and I got another thing. So maybe that's what it was. And when people saw it on streaming without any expectations, like, they could just enjoy it for what it was. But I kind of feel like it's nice that the movie actually kind of got a second chance at life, because it's actually like a pretty fascinating movie. Now, I will admit, I had seen The Empty Man before. I saw it a few years back, not long after it arrived on streaming, because I'd heard a lot of the buzz surrounding it. I didn't know anything about the disastrous, like, theater release or anything like that. All I knew was all these horror people were suddenly talking about it, and so I went and watched it. I liked it well enough at the time, but it didn't really leave a lasting impression for whatever reason. Like I said, it could be that I was just in a weird mood that day, or wasn't really paying attention, or who knows what. But recently, a couple of you guys out there recommended to me just kind of out of the blue, and I decided that I would like to give it another look. And especially because I feel like the goodwill surrounding it has really only gotten a lot stronger since then. And I have to say I liked it much better the second time around. I really admired, like, the ambition behind it. It's definitely not a straightforward horror film. It's also quite long. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes, which, that's unusually long for a horror movie. But there is kind of like this eerie power to it. And the acting performances are pretty great across the board. So here's a little setup of what happens. So in the very extended pre-title sequence, we're following four friends in 1995. And their names are Greg, Fiona, Ruthie, and Paul. And they're on a hiking trip in the snowy mountains of the Ura Valley in Bhutan, I guess. So not long into their trip, Paul, one of the guys, starts hearing this kind of weird, soft whistling sound that the other people don't seem to hear. And he kind of wanders off to follow it, almost like it's kind of hypnotized him or something. But while he goes to do that, he falls into this little crevasse type of thing. So Greg rappels down there to help him. And he finds that although Paul is not injured, there's something pretty fucking weird going on down in this little cave at the bottom of this crevasse where he fell into. For one thing, there's this big skeleton deal. It's kind of human, but not quite. Like, it's bigger than a human. It's sort of like this, looks sort of like the space jockey from Alien, and I think that that the special effects department said that was one of their inspirations for it. And it's kind of up against this, it's almost like a shrine, like against the cave wall. For another thing, Paul seems completely mesmerized by this skeleton. He's just sitting there, like, in the lotus position, just, like, staring at it. And he refuses to answer Greg when he asks him anything, and he's just sitting there staring at it like he's in a trance or something. So when Greg approaches him, be like, hey, bro, we got to get out of here, you know what I mean? Paul very creepily tells him, if you touch me, you'll die. Now, of course, Greg doesn't quite believe this, although you can see he's kind of hesitant, like, at first. I guess as you would be if somebody said something like that to you, like, in a really creepy voice. You'd be like, I'm going to touch him. You'd be like, wait, maybe not. You know what I mean? So he kind of did that. But then finally he's like, fuck it, come on. He's just loses his patience, and he's like, look, get off your ass and stop fucking around. So he touches Paul's arm, and Paul kind of closes his eyes very sadly, like, you know, fate has been sealed or whatever. So because Paul is so out of it, Greg is kind of forced to carry him out of the cave, and there's a bad snowstorm coming. Now, luckily, the hikers come across this abandoned house where they can kind of wait out the weather, which looks like it's going to be a few days or whatever. So Paul seems kind of almost comatose. No one's quite sure what's wrong with him. He's not physically hurt, but Greg thinks he might have maybe just, like, lost his marbles. You know what I mean? It's implied, because they show very briefly, like, he has scars on his wrists, that Paul has had some mental health issues in the past, so the other three friends, like, are afraid that he might have had some kind of nervous breakdown. So a day or two passes, and Paul's condition does not improve. Though at one point, we do see him whispering something, again, very creepily, to his girlfriend, Ruthie. It so happens that Ruthie also sees this terrifying, like, kind of Grim Reaper-looking figure, like, out in the snowstorm, that kind of, like, she can't quite see it, but then it, like, sort of running toward the cabin, but then, like, she's like, what the fuck, and, like, runs inside the cabin and shuts the door, and then there's banging on the door, but it's not it's not the monster, it's, like, Greg and them coming back from wherever, so it's like, so it disappeared, essentially. Now, one morning, the gang wakes up and they find that Paul is gone. His coat is missing, and there are footprints in the snow, like, very obviously going out the door. So they follow them, and when they find Paul, he's just sitting there, again in the lotus position, and staring out at the mountains. And Greg has just had enough of this shit, right? I think he just thinks he's, like, faking it or something. He's, like, telling him, it's like, look, stop trying to be so, I'm so special and all this other kind of crap, and snap out of whatever ridiculousness you're trying to pull here. And then, very suddenly, Ruthie straight up whips out a knife and starts stabbing the absolute shit out of Greg. And then she slashes Fiona's throat, and then she throws herself off a cliff, leaving Paul the only one left alive. So you might be wondering to yourself, what in the snow-choked hell was all of that about? Well, I hate to tell you, but you're not going to find out just yet. Because after the title screen, because remember I said all of that stuff happens before the title even comes on the screen. So they show the title, The Empty Man. And then the movie takes off in what seems to be a completely different direction. It's now 2018, because remember I said it was 1995 before, and we're in Missouri, and we're following a brand new character named James Lasombra. Now, we eventually learn that James used to be a police detective, but now he runs a shop selling, like, security cameras, self-defense stuff, you know, mace, bear spray, that kind of shit, you know. We also discover through vague flashbacks that James has recently lost his wife and son in a car accident that you're led to believe he feels somewhat responsible for, even though he was not in the car at the time. So James has a neighbor named Nora, who he once had an affair with, and the two of them have sort of an uneasy friendship, I guess. So Nora's teenage daughter, Amanda, drops by to see James one day, ostensibly to check on him, and she says some kinda esoteric stuff, but nothing particularly alarming. The following day, though, Nora, Amanda's mom, discovers that Amanda has completely vanished, leaving nothing but a message written in blood on her bathroom mirror that says, "The empty man made me do it." Now, Nora calls the cops, as you would, but since Amanda is 18, and obviously packed her stuff and left of her own accord, and they tested the blood and it was animal blood, it wasn't her blood. So the police don't really make finding her much of a priority, you know what I mean? So James decides to step up and investigate her disappearance himself, because like I said, he used to be a cop, and he used to have feelings for Nora, and he always kind of liked her daughter, so he's upset that she's gone, so he's going to try and find her. So he finds out from Amanda's friend, Devara, that a couple of nights before Amanda went missing, she and a bunch of their friends were hanging out on this big, creepy bridge, like on the outskirts of town or whatever. So there was an urban legend, and see, I think this is where the way they marketed this movie was like all about this urban legend, but really this urban legend bit is just like a very, very minor part of the plot. So I think that's maybe why some people, because I saw one of the trailers like after I watched the movie, and I was like, wow, that's a little bit deceptive, because that's not really what the movie is like. But it does have an urban legend aspect to it. It's just not the main thing of the plot, you know what I mean? So there's an urban legend going around the high school that Devara says. And she says, if you're on a bridge and you find an empty bottle, you blow into it and think of the empty man, and that will summon him. Like, he'll show up 3 days later. Like, you'll hear him the first day, like, see him the second day, and the third day he shows up, like, presumably to kill you, right? So, of course, the friends all do this on a lark, because they're teenagers, you know, so of course they're going to do it. But she said Amanda seemed to take it, like, a lot more seriously than the rest of them, because the rest of them were just, like, fucking around, you know what I mean? So after they all blew into the bottle, they heard someone coming toward them on the bridge and, like, got the fuck out of there because it was creepy as shit, right? It's, like, the middle of the night. Now, Devara also tells James that the last time she saw Amanda before she disappeared, Amanda was at the mall whispering into the ear of their friend Brandon, who was one of the guys that was on the bridge. So James thinks this is all pretty weird, and he later goes out to the bridge to kind of get the lay of the land or whatever. But while he's there, he discovers, to his horror, that all of the friends from that night, with the exception of Amanda and Devara, have hanged themselves beneath the bridge, like all of them just in a row, and they've left the same "empty man made me do it" message. Not long afterward, Devara also turns up dead. She gets stabbed in the face with scissors in what appears to be a suicide, but was actually kind of supernaturally carried out by the empty man. James also discovers that all the friends, including Amanda, have like just little flyers and postcards and stuff relating to a place called the Pontifex Institute. So James does a little bit of research into this and finds out that this is a sort of cult that is obsessed with tulpas, like making tulpas. If you don't know what that is, that's kind of like, it's not a real thing, obviously, but some people like do believe in it, that you can basically manifest a being from thought. That's kind of simplified, but that's basically what it is. So James goes to their headquarters and listens into this weird-ass spiel, which initially seems kind of harmless. It's a little bit new agey, very, purposely obtuse, but it doesn't seem dangerous or anything. So James talks to the head of the institute and learns more about what they believe the empty man is and what their beliefs are and stuff. And very ominously, the guy tells James it's nice to see him again, even though James is 100% certain that he has never been here before. So a member of the cult tells James, ostensibly on the down low, that Amanda was at the institute, but she got promoted, like, after a fashion, and has gone to some remote camp that the cult owns, like, out in the wilderness. So James goes out there and finds a seemingly abandoned cabin with all kinds of, like, with a filing cabinet with all kinds of files in it, and there are all these files, and all of the friends that died have files in there. And James also finds a folder marked with his own name, even though the folder is empty, which, again, is a little bit weird. So a group of cult members that are, like, dancing around a fire far away, like, they spot him and start chasing him, but he's able to escape and drive back home. So after this point, I don't want to spoil too much after that, because it sounded like I said a lot, but it's just, like, that's really maybe not even the first half of the movie. I don't think. So from that point on, like, shit gets weirder and weirder, like, as the true nature of the cult, as well as James's and Amanda's role in it, starts to become clearer. We also learn what the connection is between the events happening that we're seeing in Missouri and the earlier incident with the 4 hikers in Asia. So as I mentioned before, the resolution of the mystery kind of flirts, I want to say, with cosmic horror territory. And so I feel like maybe if you're not So maybe some people might not vibe with it if you were expecting, like I said, like a standard urban legend type of story, which is how the movie was originally marketed, much to its detriment. But I actually really liked the kind of original spin that this movie took. It was almost structured kind of like a paranormal detective story, which I thought was kind of cool, but had like a dark new age kind of flair to it. It slightly reminded me of something like The Void or The Endless. There were also, I felt some similarities to the movie Apostle, and A Dark Song, like kind of just it's in that ballpark, you know what I mean? So if you liked any of those, I imagine you would probably enjoy The Empty Man too, since it covers some of the same occult type themes. So, you know, just like everything else, it's not for everyone. Some people might find it too slow, too character focused, not, you know, there's no big jump scares or anything like that, you know, not anything too egregious. But I thought it had like a really spooky, hypnotic feel to it. And like I said, I really did like the detective aspect of it. He was like uncovering this weirder and weirder shit. And I liked the way that it was structured like that. So I gotta say, I'm really glad I decided to give this a second watch, because I feel like I appreciated it much more this time around. Because like I said, the first time I feel like it didn't make much of an impression, but this one I think I picked up on a lot more of the nuances of the story, because I was, you know, laser focused on it. I was paying attention to it instead of like doing other things at the same time. So I picked up a lot more of it, and I liked it a lot more the second time. So I'm gonna say it's pretty easy to see why The Empty Man eventually got the cult following that it probably deserved to start with. Like I said, I think probably the problem was that it was marketed a certain way, and people saw it and are like, what the fuck is this? This isn't anything like what the trailer is like, because it was going for that urban legend kind of thing, because there were a lot of those kind of movies coming out, like a creepypasta type thing, and it's really not like that at all. It does have an urban legend aspect to it. There is an urban legend aspect to The Empty Man, but that's really very, very minor, like compared to the other cult stuff that's going on. So that will do it for this review. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.